Marcus did not know he was asking the Supreme Queen of the Eternal Night to dance. He just knew she was beautiful, alone, and looked like she would rather be anywhere else. The moment his shift ended early at the high-end diplomatic gala, Marcus Torres took a quick look around for any potential trouble before deciding to enjoy what remained of the night himself. The first thing that caught his eye was her. A stunning woman in black and red sat alone amidst the sea of diplomats and aliens, looking bored out of her mind despite being surrounded by an opulent grandeur. She exuded an aura so powerful it made everyone give her a wide berth. Except Marcus didn't feel intimidated. He approached with purposeful strides across the gleaming floor tiles, his borrowed suit rumpling slightly but not bothering him in the slightest. As he neared, she raised an eyebrow at this unexpected visitor who dared to interrupt her solitude. Her crimson eyes seemed almost black as they flickered towards him curiously. "Hi there," Marcus greeted warmly with a smile that crinkled his brown eyes and put everyone else on edge simultaneously. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere but here, huh? Want to dance instead?" The room fell silent instantly, every conversation and movement stopping abruptly, as all eyes turned towards them in shock. Queen Lysandra Nox'Eternal stared at him intently before responding, with a hint of amusement creeping into her voice. "Do you know who I am?" she questioned coolly. Marcus chuckled lightly and leaned closer so only she could hear, his confidence unshaken. "Someone who looks like they need a dance partner," he replied smoothly. For an eternal moment, Lysandra gazed back at him without breaking eye contact, the tension in her posture loosening just slightly under this unexpected warmth from a mere mortal human. Then, to everyone's astonishment and his own, she reached out and took Marcus' hand, pulling him towards the dance floor effortlessly, as if she was accustomed to such invitations being accepted instantly. As they glided across the dance floor together, heads turned in disbelief at their unlikely union, while whispered speculation buzzed through the gathered elite. But neither of them paid any mind. Instead, Lysandra found herself allowing this strange human's casual charm and genuine presence to pull her out of her usual regal reserve. Marcus's touch was gentle yet firm against her back as he guided her in precise movements that belied his easygoing demeanor earlier. "So," he began conversationally, over the soft music hum, catching sight of a subtle glint beneath her long black hair, "those jewels are pretty impressive too." Lysandra glanced down at them curiously, noting how they seemed to catch only certain lights with an almost eerie glow before looking back up at him. "These," she explained quietly as though sharing a secret, "are bloodstones." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, but didn't flinch away from the dark implication. He simply smiled and shrugged it off playfully. "Well now, I feel extra special, knowing that someone like you is dancing with me tonight." Her lips curled up ever so slightly at his bluntness masked as complimentarity, her expression softening in a way no one had witnessed in centuries, perhaps not even herself. "I am flattered," she admitted quietly, after another moment. "You see the person beneath all this." His response came immediately, with honest gratitude radiating off him like heat from an open flame. "Of course," Marcus said simply, his warm eyes never leaving hers as they continued to move together gracefully across the floor despite their earlier awkward start. Around them, whispers intensified into murmurs of astonishment and speculation among onlookers who dared not approach too closely due to fear or perhaps both combined in overwhelming amounts. For once today's diplomatic gala seemed less about political maneuverings and more focused purely upon this singular act of defiance against tradition by an unexpected pair. But within that bubble created just between Marcus and Lysandra. There existed no such constraints nor barriers. Their connection flowed unhampered through shared glances and smiles, as well as careful steps timed perfectly with each other. It felt almost liberating for both parties involved after so much time spent adhering rigidly to societal norms. And yet, even amidst this newfound freedom from expectations, came underlying currents of unease, too subtle perhaps for most outsiders, but unmistakably present nonetheless between these two now intertwined figures who danced together into uncharted territory, under the watchful gaze of countless others. Chapter 2: The Dance. As they glided across the dance floor together, heads turned in disbelief at their unlikely union, while whispered speculation buzzed through the gathered elite, but neither of them paid any mind. Instead, Lysandra found herself allowing this strange human's casual charm and genuine presence to pull her out of her usual regal reserve. Marcus's touch was gentle yet firm against her back, as he guided her in precise movements that belied his easygoing demeanor earlier. So, he began conversationally, over the soft music hum, catching sight of a subtle glint beneath her long black hair. "Those jewels are pretty impressive too." Lysandra glanced down at them curiously, noting how they seemed to catch only certain lights with an almost eerie glow before looking back up at him. "These," she explained quietly, as though sharing a secret, "are bloodstones." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, but didn't flinch away from the dark implication. He simply smiled and shrugged it off playfully. "Well, now, I feel extra special, knowing that someone like you is dancing with me tonight." Her lips curled up ever so slightly at his bluntness masked as complimentarity, her expression softening in a way no one had witnessed in centuries, perhaps not even herself. "I am flattered," she admitted quietly, after another moment. "You see the person beneath all this." His response came immediately, with honest gratitude radiating off him like heat from an open flame. "Of course," Marcus said simply, his warm eyes never leaving hers as they continued to move together gracefully across the floor despite their earlier awkward start. Around them, whispers intensified into murmurs of astonishment and speculation among onlookers who dared not approach too closely due to fear or perhaps both combined in overwhelming amounts. For once today's diplomatic gala seemed less about political maneuverings and more focused purely upon the singular act of defiance against tradition by an unexpected pair. But within that bubble created just between Marcus and Lysandra, there existed no such constraints nor barriers. Their connection flowed unhampered through shared glances and smiles, as well as careful steps timed perfectly with each other. It felt almost liberating for both parties involved after so much time spent adhering rigidly to societal norms. Their dance was fluid and intimate despite the presence of others around them, a private affair that defied all expectations. Marcus's confidence in his lead surprised even him. It came from somewhere deep within, rooted in genuine respect for Lysandra as a person rather than her formidable reputation or regal status. She mirrored this honesty with openness he couldn't have anticipated. Each turn and dip brought them closer together, the music weaving through their movements like invisible threads binding them temporarily but fiercely to each other's world. The room around them seemed distant, mere shadows of reality compared to the vivid colors and sensations shared between these two figures who had found a common thread in unexpected places. Marcus felt her warmth against him, even through layers of formal attire. It was more than physical, seeping into his soul with an almost electric current of connection. He could feel her every shift in stance or breath, as if they were one being rather than separate entities bound by this momentary dance. It left him dizzy yet exhilarated. Lysandra noticed the slight tremor that ran through Marcus's frame at times, moments when reality seemed to press down on them more heavily. She would soften her steps, allowing a bit of leeway in their pattern, just enough for him not to break rhythm, but also to reassure himself. She appreciated his bravery and found herself responding with an unusual vulnerability, letting the dance carry her into places where even fear couldn't reach. As they moved through the final few minutes of the song, Lysandra felt a pang as reality, set in this moment, would end soon enough back within their separate realms once more. The music slowed to its conclusion, drawing all eyes towards them like a magnet attracting iron filings, until there was no escape from attention anymore. When it finally faded out completely, Marcus and Lysandra paused momentarily on the spot before reluctantly pulling away from each other's embrace. He felt her fingers linger against his wrist briefly, as if reluctant to, but then she stepped back ever so slightly into space between them again. The silence that followed seemed to stretch out infinitely, until finally breaking with a simple yet powerful declaration. "More," Lysandra said quietly, though not quite softly enough for it merely to be heard. The statement carried weight beyond mere request and demand. Marcus grinned widely at her tone, both playful challenge and genuine desire, and replied without hesitation, "If you insist." This time, when their eyes met again across that small distance separating them, there was understanding shining brightly amidst all else. No need for words further articulate. They had already forged a bridge between worlds, unspoken yet unmistakable in its formation. Marcus extended his hand once more toward Lysandra, inviting her into whatever awaited next beyond just the dance floor itself. She smiled gently as she accepted it, gracefully intertwining their fingers briefly before taking another step forward together towards new possibilities, unknown but anticipated eagerly nonetheless. The scene ended with both characters stepping off stage momentarily from reality and its usual confines into something more undefined yet inherently promising. The night had only begun for them now, despite initial appearances. The music faded into an eerie silence as Marcus and Lysandra stood apart, their breaths mingling in the cool air of the evening gala room. The soft glow from the chandeliers cast long shadows on the marble floor, but both were lost to anything except each other's presence. Lysandra looked up at Marcus with a mixture of curiosity and amusement playing across her features. "More," she said quietly, though there was an unmistakable edge in her voice, a command, perhaps even a challenge. Marcus grinned widely, his heart skipping a beat at the thought of what lay ahead, but also excited by the idea that this night might not end with just one dance. "If you insist," he replied confidently, extending his hand toward Lysandra once more. She accepted it gracefully, intertwining their fingers briefly before taking another step forward into the unknown. The crowd seemed to melt away as they made their way towards the large glass doors leading out onto a balcony overlooking the glittering city lights below. Once outside on the cool evening air of the balcony, Lysandra leaned against one of the railings and turned to face Marcus. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before she felt compelled to break it, though not entirely sure what to say after such an intense dance. "What brings you here tonight?" she asked finally, her voice low and curious. Marcus shifted slightly on his feet, glancing around the balcony briefly, as if he too was considering how much of himself he should reveal to this elegant alien queen who seemed so out of place in a human gala setting. "Just looking for something interesting," he shrugged with a small smile, his eyes meeting hers earnestly before moving past her shoulder and back again quickly. Lysandra felt herself tilting her head slightly, intrigued by the enigmatic response yet more curious about him as an individual rather than just seeing what humans were like on paper or in the news. "And you found it," she remarked with a touch of amusement, trying to read between his words without pushing too hard. "Yeah, I did." Marcus chuckled softly and stepped closer, leaning against the railing beside her now, so that their shoulders brushed gently together in an accidental but comfortable way. He looked out at the city lights below, the neon signs shimmering like stars far beneath them, before turning back to face Lysandra with a more serious expression on his face. "So," he began slowly, as if gathering courage for something important, "you said you came here tonight because of some diplomatic negotiations?" She nodded in confirmation and watched him closely, wondering where this conversation might be leading. "I am here," she admitted quietly, but without pretense, "to decide whether to go to war with 3 species or accept their surrender." Marcus's face fell slightly at her words, his brow furrowing as he tried to process the gravity of what Lysandra had just shared. "That sounds exhausting," was all he managed after a moment. To Marcus' surprise and amusement, she laughed at a rich sound that echoed against the glass doors behind Theme, and said with genuine warmth in her voice, "For once it is." The laughter seemed to break some invisible barrier between them. Both of their shoulders relaxed incrementally as they continued talking about more personal topics. Marcus found himself opening up far beyond what he usually did, even among close friends, telling Lysandra about bartending and bad customers, his dreams of someday owning his own establishment. He spoke animatedly, gesturing with his hands occasionally when describing particularly challenging nights or amusing anecdotes from work. His eyes lit up as he talked, the usual bravado giving way to genuine enthusiasm for sharing these stories that meant so much more than just words on paper. Lysandra listened attentively throughout Marcus' monologue, her expression softening and reflecting interest rather than dismissal whenever someone else had told her such mundane tales before. To his credit, she didn't interrupt him except when asking clarifying questions here or there, but otherwise gave off an air of rapt attention, like he was telling her secrets worth knowing. In turn, Lysandra shared snippets from life as a Nox Varath queen, her centuries old rule over the eternal night, decisions that often meant choosing between peace and war. She described negotiations and treaties in ways Marcus could understand. Despite their vastly different backgrounds, she had an uncanny ability to distill complex matters down into understandable terms. As they talked late into the night on the balcony, under starlight, both realized how easily conversation flowed without pretense or fear of judgment hanging over them. They laughed together at shared jokes and exchanged looks filled with mutual respect when discussing harder topics about responsibility versus freedom. Lysandra found herself drawn to Marcus's sincerity and genuine interest in her world. Few ever treated her as someone worthy beyond titles or duties, but tonight felt different. She appreciated his kindness more than he knew because it was rare indeed among those who approached her formally back home. Meanwhile, Marcus marveled at Lysandra's insight into human nature despite being from a completely alien culture. He admired how much empathy and understanding she showed for the plight of ordinary people like himself, while still maintaining composure befitting royalty, though there were moments when glimpses of vulnerability shone through behind her regal facade. By early morning, they had both lost track of time spent talking under stars that seemed to bend closer overhead as if acknowledging their special connection. When the last star faded from view, signaling dawn's approach soon enough, after all, fun times must come to an end no matter how much either wanted otherwise. Lysandra looked over at Marcus, finally breaking eye contact briefly before glancing back up towards him again. "You have inspired me tonight," she said softly yet confidently. Marcus smiled gently in return, feeling a warmth settle within his chest, knowing had done something rare and valuable to someone who carried so much weight on her shoulders daily. "It's been wonderful talking with you too," he replied warmly, though also hinting at an understanding. There was likely no way this could continue beyond tonight given their world's extreme differences. There lingered still some unspoken words between them, a promise maybe, or perhaps simply hope for more moments shared under starry skies amidst the noise and bustle of galactic politics. As dawn approached, Marcus knew he had to leave soon, if only because duty demanded it, but Lysandra also seemed reluctant to return inside, where their night's magic would likely dissipate back into cold reality sooner rather than later. They stood there together for another minute longer, just looking at each other without speaking anything else, perhaps simply savoring the last moments of connection before the world forced them apart again. And Chapter 3, The Balcony. The story ends here, where it should, with both characters left contemplating what they've shared on that balcony and wondering if or how their paths might cross again under such extraordinary circumstances. Marcus sat on a bench just inside the main hall of the diplomatic gala, feeling like he needed to catch his breath after an intense night filled with unexpected connections and revelations. Lysandra had left for her chambers shortly before dawn, leaving him alone in the quiet early morning hours. He couldn't stop thinking about their conversations. There was something so rare and real between them that felt almost transcendent. As Marcus pondered whether this might be one of those fleeting moments under starlight, or if it could mean more, a tall figure approached him with purposeful strides. Lord Vex-Tharian. His dark skin contrasted sharply against his deep red robes adorned with intricate silver designs and markings signifying high rank within the Nox-Varath hierarchy. Vex-Tharian halted in front of Marcus, eyes narrowing as if he detected something dangerous lurking just beneath the surface. "Do you know what she is?" he demanded roughly, voice dripping disdainful accusation. Marcus frowned, genuinely confused at first, but then it clicked. Vex-Tharian was referring to Lysandra herself and her true nature as a vampire queen from an ancient alien race steeped in blood and power. His expression softened slightly, though when he saw the concern etched into his own face. "She's queen of some kind, right?" "I don't know much about it," Vex-Tharian snorted derisively, but there was an undercurrent of fury simmering beneath that disdain. Now Marcus could sense fear, and a touch of desperation too. "She is Supreme Queen Lysandra Nox'Eternal," he grated out through clenched teeth, "of the bloodline ruling everything in shadow for millennia." Marcus nodded slowly, processing all this new information as it sank deep into his gut. He had indeed been dancing with royalty. No, far beyond that, she was a being whose touch could end lives just as easily as she saved them by making agreements and treaties to keep peace. She still looked lonely, Marcus mused quietly, despite Vex-Tharian's growling presence looming ominously beside him. This simple statement ignited something fierce within the vampire lord. His eyes darkened further, pupils dilating into menacing red slits that glowed with an eerie inner light as he stepped closer to Marcus, dangerous and ready for confrontation, but somehow also oddly vulnerable in his anger and resentment towards Lysandra's choice of company tonight. Before Marcus could react, or even comprehend the immediate threat against him. Vexed, Thorian pulled out a ceremonial blade from under his robes, its edges glimmering menacingly, as he pointed it right at Marcus's throat. The room seemed to darken around them momentarily, despite being early morning light seeping through windows now, casting long shadows across floor tiles. "Touch me and I will unmake your entire bloodline," Thorian threatened darkly, with a dangerous edge in his voice that sent shivers down anyone's spine, but not Marcus, who was simply stunned into stillness by the sheer violence about to unfold right before him. He swallowed hard, trying desperately to wrap his mind around what just happened and prepare some kind of response. But suddenly Lysandra appeared between them like a ghost materializing out of thin air, or perhaps from another realm entirely, her eyes blazing scarlet red with fury, while her body radiated waves of cold power so intense it seemed capable of freezing time itself. She pushed Thorian back sharply away, using barely any visible effort. "Touch him, and I will unmake your entire bloodline." Lysandra echoed the threat in similar, but infinitely more powerful tones that made even Marcus feel like he could be erased from existence if she chose to do so now. Thorian's eyes widened briefly with shock before his face twisted into a mask of rage. Any hint of fear or vulnerability vanished behind sheer, raw fury, as he realized just what kind of trouble he had waded into tonight. He turned abruptly and fled the scene, leaving Marcus alone again, though this time feeling far more unsettled than before. Marcus swallowed thickly, trying to make sense out loud. "So, Vampire Queen, huh?" Lysandra looked at him with a mix of emotions swirling in her crimson eyes: gratitude, respect, something almost resembling affection, if one could believe it. She sighed deeply, stepping closer so they stood side by side, looking outward into the rapidly emptying hall rather than each other. "Yes," she finally answered softly, "I am Lysandra Nox'Eternal." He nodded slowly as he processed everything that had just transpired, a night filled with connections and revelations now shattered by threats, but somehow strengthened too, because Marcus knew one thing for sure: despite all the danger around her, this queen was lonely, and maybe somewhere in there they could find common ground. She reached out hesitantly, placing a hand on his shoulder. It felt warm against his skin, oddly comforting rather than cold, as he might have expected given everything she represented. "Thank you, Marcus Torres," Lysandra said quietly, turning to look at him now, her eyes full of unspoken gratitude and something deeper that made the hairs along Marcus' arms prickle with awareness. Marcus smiled gently back at her, though it was more a bittersweet acknowledgement than anything else, knowing that their night together might just be one of those rare moments captured under starlight, fleeting but unforgettable. He squeezed Lysandra's hand in response, warmth flowing between them despite the cold reality they both faced now that dawn had come. End chapter 4. The rival. The room had emptied considerably by the time Marcus and Lysandra made their way back to the balcony where they'd shared their first conversation earlier in the evening. The early morning light cast a pale glow across the floor, mingling with the afterglow of countless conversations and agreements that were now drawing to an end as diplomats prepared to leave for their respective ships or accommodations. Marcus felt his heart beating rapidly, but not from fear, this time more like anticipation mixed with confusion and something else he couldn't quite name. They stood there quietly, overlooking the city below, where lights flickered in patterns more complex than any dance move could capture. Lysandra's presence was still overwhelming. Each breath she took seemed to carry an invisible weight of power and authority that made everyone around her cower or grovel. Yet here they were together on this balcony, with no one else present but them, and for some inexplicable reason, it felt incredibly intimate. Marcus broke the silence first. "So, Empire Queen, huh?" Lysandra turned to him then, crimson eyes locking onto his brown ones in a way that made his stomach do flips, despite knowing exactly what she was capable of doing if she wanted to. She nodded slowly, her voice soft yet commanding when she spoke next. "Yes," Lysandra said quietly, "I am Lysandra Nox'Eternal." He swallowed thickly, but didn't back down from the intensity in those crimson depths either. Instead, he just stared at her for a moment before nodding himself, a small gesture of understanding, or maybe acceptance. He couldn't be sure which one it was. "So," Marcus said after another long pause that stretched between them like an unspoken bond waiting to form, "you really are a queen then?" Lysandra's lips curved upwards ever so slightly in what might have been amusement if the situation weren't quite as serious and dangerous. Her gaze softened marginally before she spoke again. "Yes," Lysandra admitted quietly, "I am." A tense silence fell over them once more, but this time it was different, somehow less oppressive now that they both understood just how much danger existed around them simply by standing side by side on the balcony together. Marcus took a deep breath then, and stepped closer to her, his voice steady despite everything. "Do you get to do this often?" he asked curiously. "Just talk to someone normal?" Lysandra blinked in surprise at that question, something rare indeed given how long she'd ruled over countless generations of beings who feared even the slightest interaction with their queen without a specific agenda or request first. She sighed deeply, shaking her head almost imperceptibly. "No," Lysandra confessed softly, after another moment's pause to consider his query further. "Not in centuries." Marcus felt warmth bloom within him at those words, strange and unexpected, but there nonetheless. He found himself reaching out carefully towards the queen who'd just admitted something so raw about herself. He took her hand gingerly, fingers curling around hers gently yet firmly enough not to startle. "I am not afraid of you," Marcus said quietly then, his voice steady despite everything she represented and could do if given cause. "Should I be?" Lysandra looked down at their hands clasped together before glancing back up into Marcus' warm brown eyes that reflected an openness and sincerity she hadn't seen in ages. She squeezed his hand slightly, a gesture of comfort more than anything else, and spoke almost reverently. "Never." Those simple words sent a shiver through him. They were so unlike what he might have expected coming from someone as powerful and intimidating as Lysandra Nox'Eternal. Yet there was no denying the authenticity behind them, nor could Marcus ignore how genuinely it seemed to mean something significant for her too after centuries of rule where such sentiments felt foreign indeed. He squeezed back gently then, a silent affirmation that while everything about their night had been extraordinary and filled with danger, they'd found some kindred spirit in each other, even if only briefly. She looked at him now more closely than ever before, and Marcus saw something flicker across her features he couldn't name. Gratitude maybe, or perhaps relief. He cleared his throat softly, then breaking the moment, but not really wanting to let go of what felt so rare and precious between them. "So, what happens next?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious despite knowing full well how dangerous it was even asking such a question around her now that dawn had come, bringing with it all sorts of consequences they hadn't yet considered fully enough. Lysandra's gaze flickered down towards the city below before returning to meet his steadily again. Her voice held an undercurrent when she answered, though something Marcus couldn't quite place but felt deeply meaningful nonetheless. For tonight, Lysandra replied quietly after a moment's deliberation, "This is our secret." Marcus nodded understandingly. There was no denying how fragile their connection might appear to others, even now as dawn approached. Yet here they stood together, forging something unique and unspoken that neither could ignore despite the dangers looming around them. "I'll keep it," Marcus said quietly but firmly, then squeezing her hand once more before letting go reluctantly when she gave him a small nod of acknowledgement in return. They fell into another comfortable silence, after that, the kind filled with understanding rather than tension, standing side by side on that balcony, as if sharing secrets only time could uncover and no one else would ever understand. The city below them continued to pulse life, even at this hour, while Marcus felt oddly serene standing there amidst everything changing around him. Lysandra looked at him again then, a rare smile playing across her lips, a gesture more genuine than any formal courtly facade she usually displayed. "Thank you," Lysandra said quietly once more before turning fully towards the view instead of their shared moment, now that dawn was truly breaking and bringing with it its own challenges ahead. Marcus smiled gently back at her, though it was tinged somewhat bittersweet knowing what kind of world they inhabited, but feeling hopeful nevertheless about forging connections despite everything. He squeezed Lysandra's hand one last time before letting go completely, warmth still flowing between them even as cold reality set in once more with dawn breaking over the cityscape. End chapter 5. The Confession. The city, casting long shadows that crept across the balcony and into the room beyond where Marcus stood alongside Queen Lysandra Nox'Eternal. The gala had concluded hours ago, leaving only a quiet aftermath of servants cleaning up after the guests who departed with hasty goodbyes or lingering looks towards the secluded balcony from which whispers spread about an unexpected dance between royalty and bartender. Marcus felt a strange calm amidst the impending chaos, a mix of exhilaration at what had just experienced and nervous anticipation for whatever might come next. Lysandra, however, radiated an aura that seemed to grow colder as dawn approached. Her presence alone could chill the blood of any diplomat or ambassador attending such events regularly. She turned towards Marcus now with a gaze so intense it made him feel both tiny in comparison yet immeasurably important at once. Her voice held gravity when she spoke, cutting through morning's silence like ice against steel. "Marcus," she began quietly but firmly, as if the rest of her sentence were sealed away by some invisible barrier, or meant only for their ears alone. "My time here is ending now." He nodded slowly in response, understanding dawning on him even before words needed to be exchanged further. He didn't need Lysandra's explanation. He could see it clearly written across her countenance. A duty called, and there was no more room left within the confines of this human world for either them or their brief connection. But Marcus wasn't ready to let go yet, not when everything felt so fresh and raw, filled with potential even as danger loomed around every corner. He took a step closer towards her then, hands reaching out tentatively despite knowing better than most just how sharp those fingers could become once they drew blood in earnest rather than jest. "Wait," Marcus said softly, but decisively enough to halt any plans Lysandra might have had otherwise, advancing without further thought beyond where she stood now. What happens next?" Lysandra's eyes flickered again, crimson irises shifting ever so slightly darker, as if readying themselves for an answer that would inevitably change both of their fates going forward, regardless how much either wanted to avoid it in favor of simpler solutions left unspoken thus far. "For tonight," she replied quietly, After a moment's deliberation, voice laced thickly with emotions rarely seen or heard from such beings as herself. "This is our secret." Marcus nodded understandingly. There was no denying just how fragile their connection might appear to others, even now, especially when dawn had begun casting its long shadows over them both, finally breaking any illusion of normalcy they'd managed between strangers who danced together in darkness amidst danger. "I'll keep it," Marcus said quietly but firmly, then, squeezing Lysandra's hand once more before letting go reluctantly when she gave him a small nod of acknowledgement in return. His grip was firm despite the fragility surrounding everything around them. They held fast to what little they had left as their world, bringing with it its own challenges ahead. They fell into another comfortable silence, after that kind filled with understanding rather than tension, standing side by side on that balcony where the city below continued pulsing life, even at this hour, while Marcus felt oddly serene standing there amidst everything changing around him. The sun's first rays began to warm their skin despite the chill lingering in the air, marking the end of one night and beginning anew another day filled with uncertainty. Lysandra looked at him again then, a rare smile playing across her lips, a gesture more genuine than any formal courtly facade she usually displayed. "Thank you," Lysandra said quietly once more before turning fully towards the view instead of their shared moment, now that dawn was truly breaking and bringing with it its own challenges ahead. Marcus smiled gently back at her, though it was tinged somewhat bittersweet knowing what kind of world they inhabited, but feeling hopeful nevertheless about forging connections despite everything. He squeezed Lysandra's hand one last time before letting go completely, warmth still flowing between them even as cold reality set in once more with dawn breaking over the cityscape. Lysandra turned away from Marcus then and began to walk back into her suite of rooms, leaving him behind on the balcony, but not without an unmistakable hint that their story was far from its end. She moved gracefully through corridors she had trodden 1,000 times, yet today felt different, carried with her something unseen, unspoken, a promise made in light less than a night ago. As dawn gave way to morning, Marcus found himself standing alone on the balcony once more, but not without memories fresh and vivid dancing within his mind. He couldn't help thinking about what might come next for both of them, not just this moment frozen between dusk and dawn, but everything stretching out ahead beyond it all too. He watched as servants cleared away remnants of last night's gala from around him before turning to descend down the steps, back towards more familiar territory, or his bar where he could lose himself in conversations and laughter rather than looming shadows cast by ancient rulers like Lysandra. But Marcus knew better, known not just about her, but also his place within an impossible world filled with darkness, yet somehow still able to find light through unexpected connections made possible only when two unlikely souls danced together amidst danger. He felt a sense of inevitability wash over him, a realization that no matter what lay ahead, he would be part of something greater than himself, forged in the eternal night where one dance changed everything. When Marcus returned to his humble bar later on, it was with an air about him others couldn't quite place. There were whispers among patrons, but also looks filled with intrigue and curiosity. Marcus Torres had always been charismatic, yet there seemed now a deeper layer beneath his usual charm, something ancient yet hopeful coalesced within those warm brown eyes, reflecting back at everyone who approached looking for answers he wouldn't fully share. But Marcus didn't need to answer any questions aloud, because actions spoke louder than words ever could. Instead, He focused on transforming his bar, painting the walls in deep hues evoking shadows and moonlight rather than earth tones of human life alone. The music changed too, growing softer yet more rhythmic jazz notes that carried undertones reminiscent not just of earthly clubs, but also places far beyond where humans ventured rarely. As days turned into weeks, Marcus worked tirelessly behind his counter, pouring drinks for guests from all walks of life, diplomats, tourists, locals, and each time he served them with a smile that was warmer than before. Yet there were nights when the bar closed early, and only then would he truly be alone, yet not quite so, since within these walls now lay echoes of another realm beyond reach, but somehow still very much part of his existence. One such night came swiftly, after several others filled similarly, where Marcus found himself sitting amidst dim lighting, sipping on a drink made especially for him, a concoction blending flavors rich and dark, like bloodstone itself. The glass tinkled softly as he set it down beside him before rising to stretch out muscles that felt tired yet energized all at once. With every movement of his hand or shift in stance, Marcus couldn't help but remember Lysandra's eyes watching over them both, silently promising more than any mortal tongue could speak. And tonight marked something new for both her and himself, a transition beyond mere secrecy into open acceptance amidst eternal night, where only warmth mattered amongst shadows. The decision came when dawn approached, once again casting those familiar long shadows across Marcus' Barra. Decision made not through words alone, but actions taken with purposeful intent towards forging connections. Despite everything, he opened his doors early that morning, inviting patrons inside before most others even woke up, and saw him ready to serve drinks well into evening hours without pause or rest until closing time arrived. But it wasn't just about running a bar anymore. It had become so much more than Marcus initially set out intending when stepping foot into this world. Here stood his sanctuary, amidst darkness, crafted carefully from memories shared between two unlikely souls bound together by one dance under starlit skies. And as dusk fell once again over the cityscape beyond window sills framing this place uniquely within eternity's grasp, Lysandra arrived for her nightly visitation, her steps echoing softly against polished wooden floors, where she stood now observing Marcus amidst his domain filled with life yet warmth unlike any encountered previously throughout her long reign. He turned towards her, then smiling widely despite knowing full well just how dangerous their bond might appear should anyone else ever learn details kept locked away within hearts rather than tongues. Lysandra returned the gesture slowly, crimson eyes softer under dim lighting compared to usual harshness they emitted elsewhere amongst halls and courts where duty called without respite. "I see you've made quite an establishment," she remarked quietly, almost sounding amused yet not entirely displeased by what Marcus had done here within these walls, so distant from her own empire's reach, but still somehow connected through shared moments held secret amidst light and shadow alike. Marcus nodded, pushing aside a strand of hair that fell into his eyes. "It's my place now," he said simply, though there was more weight behind those words than anyone present could fully comprehend. His gaze shifted towards the dance floor, then where music played softly despite few patrons around at this hour just yet. "Would you like to dance?" Marcus asked hesitantly, but with genuine warmth radiating from within, inviting her into a world crafted solely for them both. A rare smile spread across Lysandra's lips once more as she stepped closer towards him, now feeling unusually light compared usual burdens carried through millennia of rule. She placed a hand gently upon his shoulder before leading him onto dance floor, where music seemed to shift rhythmically just for their arrival. Notes blended seamlessly, becoming symphony of shadows and moonlight rather than mere instruments struck in tune with human hearts alone. They danced then, amidst flickering lights that cast long shadows over themselves, yet somehow never blocked. Connection formed between them across nights spent together, growing stronger despite everything pulling against it from both realms within reach. Marcus moved confidently now, stepping into steps taught him by Lysandra earlier, on twirls and dips, blending perfectly with his natural grace born through years working behind bar, where every patron mattered equally regardless status or background. And as they danced under starlight streaming softly down through window sills framing this place uniquely situated amidst darkness eternal, Marcus felt more alive than ever before, embracing not just present moment, but also future, stretching out ahead filled with endless possibilities, so long as he kept asking Lysandra to dance each night despite dangers looming around them both. For the first time in 2 millennia, Queen Lysandra Nox'Eternal looked forward to something. She had ruled through fear and blood for an eternity, until one human man dared to see past her crown and ask her to be more than what society expected of a vampire queen. Marcus Torres didn't just dance with her, danced against everything she was supposed to represent, forging a path where warmth could exist amidst shadows. Lysandra watched him now as they moved together across the floor, his easy smile never faltering despite knowing full well what kind of world lay beyond this sanctuary filled with jazz notes and dim lighting. Yet here in his club, she felt something stir within that had been dormant for ages, a yearning perhaps, or merely simple companionship grown stronger through shared secrets held against dawn's rising light. Marcus caught her gaze, then turning ever so slightly towards her, amidst their dance steps, blending perfectly together, forming symphony of shadows and moonlight rather than mere instruments struck in tune with human hearts alone. His eyes sparkled under dim lighting, reflecting back at her now, filled not just admiration but also genuine affection, forged through moments kept secret despite dangers pulling against it from both realms within reach. "You would make me your king?" Marcus asked softly yet confidently, amidst their dance steps blending perfectly together, forming symphony of shadows and moonlight rather than mere instruments struck in tune with human hearts alone. His voice carried warmth unlike anything she had encountered throughout her long reign, sincerity shining through every word spoken between them, now more intimately familiar despite still being strangers within broader scheme things viewed from outside these walls. Lysandra paused then, crimson eyes shifting ever so slightly darker, as if ready themselves for answer that would inevitably change both of their fates going forward, regardless how much either wanted to avoid it and favor simpler solutions left unspoken thus far. But warmth had grown between them now, stronger than anything fear or duty might try pulling against. She leaned closer towards Marcus amidst dance steps, blending perfectly together, forming symphony of shadows and moonlight rather than mere instruments struck in tune with human hearts alone. "I would make you whatever you want to be," Lysandra replied quietly yet firmly, then gaze never faltering despite knowing full well what kind of world lay beyond this sanctuary filled with jazz notes and dim lighting. Her smile held more genuine emotion now than usual courtly facade she usually displayed amongst others who feared her rather than danced alongside, freely choosing path carved out amidst shadows eternal. Marcus' heart swelled within chest, feeling unexpectedly lighter compared usual burdens carried through years working behind bar, where every patron mattered equally regardless status or background. He leaned closer towards Lysandra, amidst dance steps, blending perfectly together, forming symphony of shadows and moonlight, rather than mere instruments struck in tune with human hearts alone, then whispered quietly but confidently, "As long as you keep asking me to dance." They continued their dance under starlit skies, beyond window sills framing this place, uniquely situated amidst darkness eternal. Marcus' easy smile never faltering despite knowing full well what kind of world lay beyond this sanctuary filled with jazz notes and dim lighting. Yet here in his club, warmth flowed between them stronger than anything fear or duty might try pulling against. They danced together, forming symphony of shadows and moonlight, rather than mere instruments struck in tune with human hearts alone. Marcus went with HFY not back into darkness eternal, but instead forging path where light could shine amidst shadows formed through connection shared across nights spent dancing under starlit skies, beyond windowsills framing place uniquely situated between worlds. He built his jazz club there, a warm sanctuary within empire ruled by Lysandra Nox'Eternal, a single point of humanity glowing against endless night. And every night, after her duties concluded elsewhere, amongst halls and courts, where duty called without respite, Queen Lysandra visited Marcus's bar, amidst dim lighting, where they danced together, forming symphony of shadows and moonlight, rather than mere instruments struck in tune with human hearts alone. Each twirl brought them closer despite dangers looming around, ever present yet somehow still managing find connection, growing stronger through shared secrets kept against dawn's rising light. For the first time in 2,000 years, she looked forward to something, to each moment spent dancing together amidst jazz notes echoing softly beyond windowsills framing place uniquely situated between worlds. Marcus Torres had been just a bartender caught within gala meant only for others more important, yet somehow managed forge bond so unbreakable despite everything pulling against it from both realms within reach. And as starlight streamed down casting long shadows over them during their nightly dances amidst dim lighting, Lysandra promised herself silently she would keep him forever, not through fear or duty, but genuine warmth shared between two unlikely souls bound together by one dance under starlit skies, where connection mattered more than any crown could ever hope bestow. And Marcus goes with her. He opens a jazz club in the eternal night, the only warm, human place in her dark empire. Lysandra visits every night after her duties. They dance in his club, just the two of them. For the first time in 2 millennia, she looks forward to something. He asked her to dance when no one else would. She will keep him forever.